Okay, hello chess players. A while back I was playing a game where my opponent blundered, and I made a video about it, and I called it "Waiting for My Opponent to Blunder." And then somebody complained, that title was kind of misleading. I thought I was going to get a lesson on how, to wait for my opponent to blunder, kind of like the art of it. So I figured, why not make a real video where that's the theme, where I really sit down and talk about the theoretical side of how to wait for somebody to blunder and kind of goes what goes through my mind when I'm playing a game and I'm playing theory and I am waiting for some sort of theory mistake or some sort of blunder and sort of how I take advantage of that sort of on my level and how you can take advantage of it on your level with a certain amount of confidence. So anyways, if you like content like this, want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click your notification icon. So this was a position I had in a tournament recently that I played in, like a live one, first live tournament I played in about 7 years. So I don't do it often, but I do occasionally play, like if it's unrated or whatever. And whenever you're playing live tournaments or live games, it's kind of like you have a couple phases that you go through when you play. Like the first phase is you're just kind of playing the theory until your opponent leaves your book, and then you're looking for that blunder. So sort of the first game of the phase is you're waiting to see if they kind of blunder within the theory, and then the second phase is like you're calculating and assessing and trying to figure out sort of if they have blundered. And I thought this was a good example because there were a couple of moments where I could have kind of taken it a little bit further and I didn't. And the reason was I wasn't 100% sure if my opponent was blundering or if my opponent was still in their theory. And I want to kind of try to explain, sort of how that works and what my process was here. So the game starts out, it's a Stafford gambit. E4, E5, knight f3, knight f6 takes, knight c6, knight takes c6, d6, d3, bishop c5, bishop e2, and then h5. So this is kind of the normal type of attack in the Stafford gambit. And then I play c3, my opponent plays knight g4. Now, so far, this is what we call the Schranz line, and so far, this is all pretty well known. So I continue with d4, and then my opponent plays queen f6. Now, here's the thing. Queen f6 leaves my theory. So kind of the first thing I have to decide is whether or not queen f6 is a blunder or whether it's preparation. And the confusing thing about that is since I haven't looked at this exact position on a computer before, it's actually kind of hard to gauge because the actual mainline theory is the Schranz line, if you want to call it theory. This is what I was more familiar with. Bringing this queen to h4, playing pawn to g3 to prevent mate, queen back to f6, and then bishop f3 is my preparation. This begins the Schranz line. But there's another line here that is pretty wild. It continues with pawn f3, which definitely wins a piece, and then black continues with something like h4, and black has like a ton of counterplay for the material. And this is well known. And this was a line I didn't feel comfortable going down because it's actually a line that Stockfish misassesses. There's a lot of videos about this line online. Black has a ton of compensation for the material. There's a lot of holes in white's camp. So one of the things that I didn't fully understand was when my opponent played queen f6, there is of course this possibility that I could just win a piece right here. I can get rid of the threat on f2 by simply taking the knight. And of course, when I take the knight, the bishop on c5 is still hanging. I can still play pawn captures c5. So bishop takes g4 seems logical, hitting my queen. But then, in order for me to continue to play this and win a piece, I would have to play f3 and create a double attack. Now I'm attacking the bishop on g4 and the bishop on c5. So that seems great. But boy, does this look remarkably similar to the Schranz line. And as I was looking at it, I was like, okay, so what if queen h4 check, g3, queen h3, this is sharing a lot of DNA with stuff that I'd seen before. Maybe castle's queenside followed by h4 is going to come. There's a lot of looseness to the king. I've got basically zero development right here. Is all of this worth a piece? So in the back of my mind on queen f6, I'm thinking to myself, did my opponent just blunder, or is this something they've looked at on Stockfish? And I genuinely don't know. So I try to find the safe alternative here, which is bishop to f3. Now, is that the best move? No. Like, I looked at this on the computer when I got home, and yeah, I could have just won the piece. I could have played bishop g4 and then f3. But it's still advantage white. It's still major advantage white. I didn't weaken my position with pawn to g3. The ball is firmly in black's court, And since I don't have any additional weaknesses, on the next, if there is another piece hang, I'm going to be fairly confident that I can take it because there's not going to be all these weaknesses on the king side that he can work with. Because again, that's very similar to the theory that I already know about this position. So my opponent continues with bishop b6, so that piece isn't hanging. I continue with pawn to h3, attacking the knight. And this is kind of the normal way to refute the Stafford. You just kind of force the knight back. At that point, you can just develop normally. You can play e5, bishop e3, knight d2. You can even castle kingside without much risk of black breaking through on the king side because that knight is, of course, now on a passive square. So my opponent does the normal Stafford Gambit thing, don't retreat, move everything forward. They play c5. But now I'm really confident that, look, this knight is just hanging. There are no additional weaknesses for him to come after. There's no king safety issue. This doesn't look anything like the Schrantz line. I'm very confident that c5 is a blunder, and therefore I go ahead and take the piece. So h takes g4, and then my opponent responds, and now things get really obvious. Rook takes rook, so now he's down a rook and a piece. We have king here, and then just rook h5 threatening bishop g5, just threatening to win the game on the spot. My opponent doesn't catch it. He blunders again. Gf3, I of course follow through because even though he's playing f captures g2 at this point, this is a simple calculation. Can I get back in time to stop that pawn on fg2? And of course, the answer to that question is just a resounding yes. I don't have to do anything particularly special. After he takes the pawn, I take with check, he takes back, and I just shuffle my king out of the way so that the queen covers that all-important g1 square. And the amount of material I'm up at this point is just absolutely ridiculous. And this is kind of the normal, almost Stafford Gambit position that you get quite often, is where black has somehow sacrificed absolutely everything, and then essentially the game is just over. So that was basically the game. I played the opening, I waited for a blunder. My opponent made one, but I didn't know if it was a blunder or if it was preparation because it looked close enough to the theory I was used to that I didn't know, and it wasn't the type of position I could calculate. But once we went one move deeper and I didn't have any weaknesses, I was fairly confident that when the piece was hanging, it was a blunder, and I went ahead and I took the piece. So that's kind of the give and take on the blunder situation. Once you've left your theory, it's just calculation and assessment. And if you genuinely think your opponent blunders and you don't have any legitimate reasons to think that he has it, if you think you can take the piece, go ahead and take the piece every time. If you're wrong, you're just going to lose and you're going to learn something new about chess. If you're right, you're going to win the game. And I took that knowledge from Fischer, and that's one of the pieces of advice that Fischer gave in my 6 memorable games, and it's a really good piece of advice. So anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much.